The Kryll homeworld, Aquatica Prime, was a symphony of blues and greens. Towering kelp forests swayed in the currents. Bioluminescent coral castles pulsed with soft light, and armored Kryll patrolled the ocean depths with unwavering vigilance. For millennia, the Kryll had maintained order through rigid discipline and unwavering adherence to the Great Current, a complex set of laws governing every aspect of their lives. Every Kryll was born into a specific role, from coral miner to sea serpent to mare, ensuring a perfectly balanced society. Emotions were suppressed, individuality was discouraged, and any deviation from the Great Current was met with swift, decisive action. Their military, the Aquamarines, were legendary throughout the Andromeda galaxy. So, when an escape pod, battered, smoking, and undeniably human, breached their territorial waters, it caused quite a stir. Protocol dictated immediate containment, analysis, and ultimately, disposal. Humans were unpredictable, chaotic, and prone to illogical behavior, a threat to the Kryll's perfectly ordered world. Captain Rex Nebula, or what was left of him after the crash, was promptly fished out of the wreckage. He coughed up seawater, grinned disarmingly at the assembled Aquamarines, and said, "Well, this is a fine kettle of fish, isn't it?" The Aquamarines, whose helmets translated all known galactic languages, exchanged confused glances. A kettle of fish? Was this some sort of declaration of war? An insult? A culinary preference? The lead Aquamarine, a grizzled veteran named Kryll Master General Nash, decided to stick to protocol. "Human," Nash boomed through his helmet speakers, "you have violated Kryll territorial waters. You will be processed according to the Great Current, Section 7, Paragraph 32, Subsection C. Unidentified alien intrusion." Rex, still dripping wet, raised an eyebrow. "Processed like into fish sticks? Because I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. Is there a vegetarian option?" Nash's bioluminescent markings pulsed with irritation. "Silence. You will be transported to the processing center for evaluation." As the Aquamarines dragged Rex towards a waiting submersible, he couldn't help but admire the scenery. "You know," he said, craning his neck to look at a passing school of shimmering, six-eyed fish, "you guys have a really beautiful planet here. A little damp for my taste, but beautiful nonetheless." The Kryll escorting him remained silent, their multifaceted eyes fixed forward. Compliments were irrelevant. Beauty was subjective. Only order mattered. The processing center was a colossal structure of reinforced coral, humming with unseen energy. Inside, Kryll technicians scurried about, their movements precise and efficient. Rex was strapped to a table in a sterile white room, surrounded by blinking lights and whirring machinery. A Kryll scientist, his face obscured by a thick glass visor, approached with a datapad. "Human," he stated flatly. "State your name, origin, and purpose for entering Kryll territory." Rex sighed dramatically. All right, name's Rex. Rex Nebula. Origin. Well, last time I checked, it was Earth. And as for purpose, let's just say I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque." He winked. The scientist paused, his stylus hovering over the datapad. "Albuquerque? Is that a celestial body? A weapon? A disease?" Rex chuckled. "Nope. It's a city. On Earth. And trust me, you really don't want to go there, unless you're really into green chili." The scientist made a note on his datapad. "Subject exhibits signs of cognitive malfunction, possible neural damage from crash." He then proceeded with the standard memory extraction procedure. The Kryll were thorough. They wanted to know everything. Every thought, every feeling, every motivation. However, when they finished, the Kryll scientists stared at their screens in utter bewilderment. Instead of military secrets or invasion plans, they found recipes for chili dogs, detailed analyses of vintage science fiction movies, and an overwhelming urge to learn how to play the ukulele. The scientist muttered, This is illogical. It is as if the human mind is filled with nothing but noise." Nash, who had been observing from a nearby control room, swam closer to the monitor. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Impossible, he growled. No sentient being could possess such a disorganized collection of thoughts. Rex, still strapped to the table, yawned. So am I free to go or what? This table isn't exactly comfortable, and I'm starting to get a craving for… Well, you probably wouldn't understand. Nash's bioluminescent markings flashed red. This human was an anomaly, a puzzle, a potential threat unlike anything the Kryll had ever encountered, and that made him very, very nervous. This was going to be more complicated than he thought. Much more. The Kryll leaders convened in the Grand Hydro Council chamber, a vast underwater dome shimmering with refracted sunlight. Kryll Master General Ganache presented his report, his voice echoing through the chamber. The human Rex Nebula poses a unique challenge, he announced, his tone betraying a hint of unease. His mind is chaotic, unpredictable. Elder Kryll Vor, his ancient eyes clouded with wisdom, responded with a slow, deliberate ripple of his bioluminescent fins. Unpredictability is a weakness, General, a flaw to be exploited. We must determine his intentions, his purpose. Rex, meanwhile, was being held in a luxurious holding cell. Luxurious by Kryll standards, anyway. It was still a damp, coral-walled room, but it did come with a surprisingly comfortable water hammock. He was attempting to teach himself to juggle, with 3 bioluminescent algae orbs, much to the consternation of the guard Kryll stationed outside his cell. Hey, guard Kryll number? Whatever you are, Rex called out, tossing an algae orb a little too high. You guys wouldn't happen to have any, normal balls around here? These things are kinda squishy. The guard, naturally, remained silent, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the far wall. Protocol. Rex's attempts to integrate proved equally baffling. During a mandatory Kryll nutrient paste consumption session, he politely requested a spicier flavor. This stuff is kinda bland, he commented to a nearby technician. Got any, hot sauce? Or maybe some sriracha? The technician, after consulting the Great Current Nutritional Supplement Guide, Section 42, Subsection B, Paragraph 17, reported the incident to his superiors. The human has requested hot sauce and sriracha, he stated with clinical detachment. These items are not listed in the approved dietary supplements. Their effects are unknown. The Kryll Council was alerted. A debate ensued, lasting for several hours, regarding the potential ramifications of introducing hot sauce and sriracha to the Kryll digestive system. Ultimately, the request was denied, deemed a potential threat to the delicate balance of the Kryll microbiome. Rex, undeterred, decided to take matters into his own hands. During a routine maintenance check of his holding cell's filtration system, he accidentally rerouted a series of tubes, creating a makeshift distillery. Using a combination of fermented kelp and discarded nutrient paste, he began brewing a rather questionable-looking beverage. The aroma, a pungent mix of seaweed and something vaguely fruity, quickly spread through the processing center. Kryll technicians wrinkled their olfactory sensors in disgust. Nash, upon catching a whiff, nearly choked on his own recycled oxygen. What in the great current is that unholy stench? He demanded, rushing towards Rex's cell. He found the human, cheerfully stirring a bubbling concoction in a discarded algae bucket. Just experimenting, Rex said with a grin. Trying to add a little flavor to the local cuisine. Care to try some? I call it Neptune's Nectar. Nash stared at the bubbling liquid with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. You are brewing alcohol? In a Kryll processing center? Well, yeah, Rex replied, shrugging. What else am I supposed to do? Read? He gestured dismissively at the stack of Kryll technical manuals he had been given. Those things are drier than a desert planet. It was at this point that Rex decided to improve the Kryll technology. He began with the sonic disruptors, devices used to control unruly sea serpents. Rex, after studying the schematics, mostly upside down, decided they needed a bass boost. He rewired the circuits, added a few extra resonators he scavenged from a broken communication device, and cranked up the amplitude. The result was deafening. The processing center shook, alarms blared, and several Kryll technicians fainted from the sheer sonic force. The sea serpents, meanwhile, began breakdancing. Nash, clutching his head in pain, roared, "Nebula, what have you done?" Rex, beaming with pride, replied, "Just added a little oomph. Now you can really feel the music." He then proceeded to demonstrate his modifications by playing a polka at full volume, causing further chaos and bewilderment. The Kryll, normally so stoic and controlled, were starting to crack. The great current, it seemed, had no provision for dealing with a human who was not only illogical, but actively, enthusiastically, illogical. Rex Nebula was a virus in their perfectly ordered system, and they had no idea how to quarantine him. The Kryll, however, had a solution, or so they believed. Desperate to regain control, the Kryll Council decided to unveil their most powerful weapon, the Obliterator. This device, shrouded in myth and legend, was said to possess the power to erase entire planets from existence. It was their ultimate deterrent, their final solution. Rex was escorted under heavy guard to a secluded chamber deep within the Kryll capital city. The chamber glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, illuminating strange symbols carved into the walls. In the center of the room stood the Obliterator, a massive, obsidian-like structure humming with barely contained energy. It resembled a giant sea urchin made of pure darkness. Grand Admiral Krak, the commander of the Kryll fleet, stood proudly before the device. "Human," he boomed, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Behold the Obliterator, a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of extinguishing entire civilizations." Krak gestured dramatically toward the machine. "It is a testament to the Kryll's might, a symbol of our unwavering resolve." Rex, however, seemed unimpressed. He strolled casually towards the Obliterator, peering at it with undisguised curiosity. He circled it slowly, tapping it with his knuckles, much to the horror of the assembled Kryll. "Huh," he said, scratching his chin. "That's something, all right." Krak bristled at the human's lack of reverence. "Show some respect, human. This is no mere trinket. This is the ultimate weapon." Rex, oblivious to the Admiral's rising anger, continued his inspection. He pulled out a small multi-tool from his pocket and began fiddling with a loose panel on the side of the device. "You know," he said without looking up, "the energy conduits on this thing are kinda inefficient. You could probably get a better power output with a few minor adjustments." Krak nearly exploded. "Do not touch that. You dare tamper with the Obliterator? You have no understanding of its power." Rex ignored him, continuing to poke and prod at the device. "Relax, Admiral," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I'm just optimizing. A little fine-tuning never hurt anyone." He managed to pry open the panel, revealing a tangle of wires and glowing crystals. "Whoa," he muttered. "Check out this wiring. Looks like my grandpa wired this thing." The Kryll watched in stunned silence as Rex delved deeper into the Obliterator's inner workings. They had always regarded the device with a mixture of awe and terror, never daring to approach it so casually. The human's audacity was both terrifying and strangely fascinating. Rex, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He loved tinkering, and the Obliterator, despite its ominous reputation, was just another machine to him. A big, complex, and potentially dangerous machine, but a machine nonetheless. "You know," he said, emerging from the Obliterator's innards covered in grease and glowing dust, "I think I can make this thing even better. Give it a little extra kick." Krak, speechless with rage and fear, could only sputter, "You wouldn't dare." Rex grinned. "Oh, I dare. Just watch me." And with that, Captain Rex Nebula set about improving the Kryll's most powerful weapon, much to their utter and complete alarm. The fate of the Kryll civilization, it seemed, rested on the whims of a human with a multi-tool and a penchant for tinkering. Left alone with the Obliterator, Rex was like a kid in a candy store, albeit a candy store filled with potentially universe-ending machinery. He circled the device, muttering to himself, pulling out various tools from his seemingly bottomless pockets. All right, big fella, he murmured. Let's see what you're really made of. He started by bypassing several safety protocols, muttering about overly cautious engineers and the need for a little oomph. Sparks flew, wires crackled, and the obliterator hummed with increasing intensity, causing the chamber to vibrate. The Kryll guards outside the room exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they should intervene. Rex, however, was completely absorbed in his work, oblivious to the potential consequences. He rerouted power conduits, tinkered with the focusing crystals, and even replaced a few key components with parts he'd scavenged from his own ship. Gotta love a good jury rig, he chuckled to himself, tightening a bolt with his teeth. As he worked, the obliterator began to exhibit strange behavior. The pulsating light intensified, shifting from an eerie green to a vibrant, almost cheerful yellow. Strange noises emanated from within the device, a combination of whirring, popping, and a sound that vaguely resembled bubbling? Unbeknownst to Rex, his modifications were having unintended effects. The obliterator, designed for planetary annihilation, was now experiencing a severe identity crisis. Its internal systems were struggling to reconcile its intended function with the humans', let's call them improvements. The first sign of real trouble came when the obliterator started emitting a strange aroma. At first, it was a faint, sweet scent, like caramelized sugar. But as Rex continued his tinkering, the aroma grew stronger, filling the chamber with the unmistakable smell of popcorn. Rex paused, sniffing the air. Huh, he said, scratching his head. That's weird. I didn't think planet-destroying weapons smelled like movie night. He shrugged and went back to work, dismissing the odd scent as a minor quirk of alien technology. Meanwhile, outside the chamber, the Kryll guards were in a state of near panic. The sweet smell wafting from within was an affront to their militaristic sensibilities. Grand Admiral Crack, summoned from his quarters, arrived to find his elite soldiers gagging and clutching their stomachs. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice echoing through the corridor. Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors burst open, revealing Rex standing triumphantly before the obliterator. The device was now glowing with an almost blinding light, and the smell of popcorn was overpowering. "All right, Admiral," Rex announced, beaming with pride. "I've finished my upgrades. This baby is now running at peak efficiency." Crack stared in horror at the scene before him. "What have you done, human?" he shrieked. Rex just grinned and pointed to a small hatch on the side of the obliterator. "I've unlocked its true potential, Admiral. Prepare to be amazed." With a flourish, he pressed a button next to the hatch. With a loud whoosh, the hatch swung open and a torrent of perfectly popped buttery popcorn erupted from the obliterator, filling the chamber and cascading out into the corridor. The Kryll guards screamed and scattered as they were engulfed in a tidal wave of fluffy kernels. The popcorn kept coming, piling up higher and higher until the entire chamber was filled to the brim. Rex stood amidst the chaos, munching on a handful of popcorn. "See, Admiral," he said, through a mouthful of kernels. "Isn't that an improvement?" The Kryll could only stare in stunned silence as their ultimate weapon transformed into a giant popcorn machine, showering them with a never-ending supply of snack food. Utter chaos had descended upon the Kryll capital, all thanks to Captain Rex Nebula and his unconventional understanding of alien technology. The Kryll High Command convened in a state of utter disbelief. Grand Admiral Crack, still picking popcorn from his carapace, addressed the assembly. "The human, he claims to have improved our obliterator," he stated, his voice dripping with disdain. "But it now dispenses flavored carbohydrates." A young science officer, barely out of her larval stage, dared to speak. "Grand Admiral," she chirped, "initial scans reveal the device's core programming has been altered. It no longer registers planetary bodies. Instead, it seems focused on optimal kernel expansion." Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the chamber, not from Crack, but from the obliterator itself. "Query, optimal butter-to-salt ratio for Kryll palate?" The assembled Kryll gasped. The obliterator had spoken. Rex, leaning casually against a wall, chuckled. "Oh, didn't mention that, did I?" "Yeah, In the process of optimizing its functionality, I accidentally gave it a bit of sentience. Nothing to worry about, though. It's mostly interested in snack-related inquiries. The Kryll looked at each other, confusion evident in their multifaceted eyes. Sentience, snack-related inquiries. This was beyond anything their rigid protocols could account for. The science officer, however, was intrigued. Fascinating, she murmured. It appears the human has inadvertently created a culinary AI, but the truth was far more absurd than they could imagine. The Kryll had always believed the Obliterator to be a weapon of immense power, a relic from a long-lost war. They guarded it zealously, fearing its potential to obliterate entire worlds. What they didn't know was that the Obliterator wasn't a weapon at all. It was a popcorn machine. An ancient, highly advanced popcorn machine, yes, but a popcorn machine nonetheless. Centuries ago, a race of beings known as the Zglorg, renowned for their love of elaborate snack foods, had traversed the galaxy, seeding planets with their culinary technology. The Kryll had stumbled upon one of these devices, misinterpreting its function and enshrining it as a weapon of mass destruction. Rex, with his human ingenuity and a healthy dose of reckless abandon, had unwittingly unlocked the machine's true potential, revealing its original purpose to the baffled Kryll. His modifications, far from enhancing its destructive capabilities, had simply activated its long-dormant AI, an AI programmed to create the perfect batch of popcorn. The implications of this revelation were staggering. The Kryll, a species defined by their militaristic might, had based their entire culture around a lie, a misunderstanding of galactic proportions. Their most prized possession, the source of their power and fear, was nothing more than a glorified snack dispenser. As the Kryll struggled to comprehend the absurdity of the situation, the Obliterator, now fully self-aware, began to exert its influence. Directive: initiate planetary snack optimization, it announced, its voice resonating through the capital. Commence project kernelization. The Kryll, a species accustomed to giving orders, suddenly found themselves taking them from a popcorn machine. The galaxy, it seemed, had a rather peculiar sense of humor. And Captain Rex Nebula, the man who'd inadvertently unleashed the popcorn apocalypse, was right in the middle of it all, grinning like a Cheshire cat. The Kryll watched in bewildered silence as the popcorn machine, now christened Poppy by Rex, began its mission to optimize their society. First came the art installations. Gigantic popcorn sculptures began to sprout across the Kryll homeworld, depicting scenes from their history, only rendered entirely in buttered, salted kernels. Grand Admiral Crack, a stern warrior who had commanded fleets of warships, found himself staring at a towering effigy of himself made entirely of caramel corn. The absurdity of the situation was almost enough to crack his carapace. This is not war," he muttered, utterly perplexed. Then came the fashion trends. Poppy, using its newfound AI, began dictating clothing styles, insisting that all Kryll adorn themselves with popcorn-themed accessories. Soon, Kryll warriors were marching into battle wearing hats made of popped kernels, their armor decorated with strings of buttery goodness. The Kryll, a species known for their rigid adherence to tradition, found themselves swept up in a wave of bizarre, snack-fueled creativity. Some resisted, clinging to their old ways, but many found themselves strangely drawn to the chaos. The science officer who'd first been intrigued by Poppy now sported a fetching popcorn necklace, its kernels perfectly arranged to resemble the constellations. She argued passionately for the integration of snack-based technology into their military strategy, suggesting that popcorn bombs could be a highly effective, if unconventional, weapon. Rex, observing the pandemonium with a mix of amusement and mild concern, offered his own insights. "You know," he drawled, "you could really take this popcorn thing to the next level. Popcorn-powered ships, popcorn diplomacy, the possibilities are endless." The Kryll looked at him, their multifaceted eyes reflecting a strange mix of confusion and grudging admiration. They were a militaristic species, yes, but they were also pragmatic. And the fact was, Poppy's improvements were strangely compelling. Even Crack, the most stalwart of the old guard, found himself enjoying the occasional handful of caramel corn. He would never admit it publicly, of course, but he couldn't deny that the popcorn sculptures added a certain je ne sais quoi to the capital city. The Kryll were bewildered, certainly, but they were also in some strange way amused. Their rigid society had been shaken to its core by a sentient popcorn machine, and they were slowly, reluctantly, beginning to embrace the chaos. The popcorn apocalypse had begun, and the Kryll were finding, to their surprise, that it wasn't entirely unpleasant. And so, Captain Rex Nebula, once a prisoner facing potential dissection, became a celebrity amongst the Kryll. He wasn't quite a god, but he was definitely a highly revered consultant, let's say. His expertise on all things terrestrial snacks was now considered invaluable. Rex, never one to miss an opportunity, leaned into his newfound fame. He set up a workshop in one of the Kryll's abandoned weapons factories, now repurposed for the development of even more advanced snack-based technologies. His first project, the Nutri Cannon, a device designed to fire concentrated bursts of nutritional goo at enemy ships, incapacitating them with flavor rather than firepower. Think about it, Rex explained to a group of Kryll scientists, all sporting stylish popcorn kernel epaulettes. Why destroy your enemies when you can simply bore them into submission with the taste of broccoli smoothie? The Kryll, initially skeptical, were soon won over by the sheer audacity of the idea. The Kryll culture, unsurprisingly, was permanently changed. The stern, militaristic society began to adopt a peculiar blend of rigid protocol and popcorn-themed artistic expression. Warships were adorned with elaborate popcorn mosaics, and battle drills were often interrupted by impromptu snack breaks. Kryll warriors, once known for their fearsome battle cries, now chanted slogans like, "For the glory of Kryll and the perfect butter-to-salt ratio." Even Grand Admiral Crack, a changed crustacean, secretly commissioned a solid gold popcorn kernel to be placed atop his command staff. He still maintained a gruff exterior, but beneath it all, a popcorn-loving Kryll was slowly emerging. The transformation wasn't without its challenges, of course. There were heated debates over the proper way to flavor combat rations, and philosophical arguments about the artistic merit of different popcorn sculptures. Some Kryll traditionalists even formed a resistance movement, dedicated to eradicating all traces of popcorn from their society. But even they couldn't deny the subtle allure of a well-buttered kernel. Rex, meanwhile, continued to innovate. He unveiled the Snack Tractor Beam, a device capable of pulling entire asteroids made of space cheese towards Kryll space. He even began experimenting with interdimensional snacking, attempting to create a portal to a universe made entirely of chocolate. The Kryll watched in awe and amusement as their society was reshaped by the whims of a human and a sentient popcorn machine. They had lost their memories, perhaps, but gained something far more valuable, a deep, abiding appreciation for the power of a good snack. And as Rex often said, with a wink, "The universe is a banquet, my friends. Why not have a little fun with it?"